Today is February 14th, 2015. Joining us on the porch are local musician Gregory Rosplock and local writer Jim Farfaglia.
The best place for family. What are you waiting for? Where friendships run deeper. Come join us on the porch. So glad you're on the porch.
Hey, you're right. It is time for another exciting episode of On the Porch Radio Hour, coming to you straight from the Wooden Apple Farmstead in Palermo, which is in central New York. Which, if you were around central New York on Thursday night, then you know exactly how ridiculously awesome the weather was. And it was so incredibly ridiculously awesome that I was out snowblowing for the second time in an hour when I saw this giant orb of light floating down County Route 4 toward my driveway. And like anybody in the Midwest typically, when they've encountered a giant orb of light, they've been beamed in or invited in or probed in some way. And I froze because I thought, this is it. I'm snowblowing my driveway, and I'm about to be beamed in, brought aboard, and probed. And when that orb of light stopped at my driveway, all I could think was, I'm not going without my snowblower. And I held dead fast to the handles. And in a brilliant moment, I aimed the auger chute straight at that orb of light and went right into the snowbank and started spraying gobs and gobs of sandy, salty, wet snow straight at that orb of light. But it didn't go anywhere near it. It just melted right in the middle of the air and just dropped onto the pavement and froze in the road. So then I froze again, and it opened. Kind of like a Pokeball, not like a door, but it just like split in half and opened like a giant Pac-Man, and out came 3 figures. And in that blinding orb of light, holding dead fast to my snowblower, I thought, there's 3 of them and me and a snowblower. I can do this. But then they got closer, and I realized that 2 of those 3 people were our guests for the radio show. And one of them was our audience. And all 3 of them started traipsing up the driveway, right past me, in a trance. And I followed. And I put my snowblower into high gear and flew by them, and then I snowblowed their path, thinking that they were entranced because the snow was so heavy and they didn't want to get their feet wet. So I snowblowed this path, forgetting about this giant glowing orb of light until we got inside. And they shook off the snow, and there before me was standing Jim Farfaglia, Gregory Rosplock, and our audience. And they all looked at me and said, "Did you see that?" "Yeah, what happened?" And so they took me back to Tuesday evening, where the 3 of them had encountered each other at a local establishment. We'll go unnamed. And they were all hanging out, chatting, and realized that they were all going to be on the porch. And they got really excited, and they were talking about it, and the establishment needed to close. And so they all started walking outside. And as they reached their vehicles, this giant glowing orb descended upon them. The creatures inside explained to them that they were going to get 2 out of the 3 options. They were going to be brought aboard, they were going to be beamed up, they were going to be probed. And they wanted to know which 2 of those 3 they wanted. The decision was easy, said our audience. Probed. And then he laughed. They had this awesome reverb machine, so when he laughed, it was like ha 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 ha. He was like, I'm just kidding. I want to be beamed up and brought aboard. So the creatures kicked them out of the glowing orb of light. They circled, they came back, hovered, beamed them up, and brought them aboard. And for the next 2 days, they just cruised around central New York. Sometimes people thought the sun was out, but no. It was just the 3 folks that are here. And when that fateful evening came on Thursday, they knew it was time to say goodbye. And they were dropped off right in my driveway. I know that you're thinking there has to be way more exciting stuff to this story. Unfortunately, when you don't allow probing to happen, your memory gets erased. So they remembered getting the options. They remembered being beamed up and brought aboard. They remembered chatting. They remembered cruising around town, well, above town. And they remembered being dropped off. But everywhere in the middle was just this really incredible, wonderful haze. And I'm not sure that they're all out of it yet, but I'm glad that they're here. And I'm glad that they're safe. And I'm glad that we'll have the next 2 days together because there's no way they're leaving. I'll be snowblowing for that time while they hang out inside and recall the haze. But until we talk more about that during your interviews, Gregory, you're on the porch.
Gently fell on a winter's firewood. I donned my boots and coat to help my father like I should. I stacked it 10 miles high and I hauled it down the stairs, being ever so humble, a home warm and fair. Mother worked all night for Christmas morning chill. We couldn't shut our eyes. You can't know what you can't hear until the world is no longer as big as you dream. Now everything I ever feared was right in front of me. I could never quite handle the truth. To memories of my youth. Suddenly the glue began to fade and peel. I was tails away, so my brother had to deal. Our mother's fallen ill with the devil's hand disease, and our home warm and fair has fallen to its knees. I could never quite handle the truth. So I cling to memories of my youth. I could never quite handle the truth. So I cling to memories of my youth.
After 27 years of working for the county at Camp Hollis in Oswego, and after numerous books and tons of writing and impacting hundreds, probably thousands of lives. Jim Farfaglia is now very deep into his writing, collecting stories, and he's on the porch. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just to put it in perspective, Gina and I just finished our 8th year working with one summer camp. And we calculated that after those 8 years, we worked with 300 staff members and over 3,000 campers. So in 27 years of doing that kind of work, that's hard for me to, I mean, math isn't my strong suit, but that's really hard to add up. That's really incredible.
Yeah. I never bothered to do that kind of math. It's mind-boggling.
It really is. It really is. And when I'm around town and you know, people are chatting and we're talking about things that we've done and things that we've been involved with, and your name comes up, it doesn't matter who we're talking with. They know who you are, which is really awesome.
That's one of the interesting things about when you work at a camp like that there's whoever's running it or is the mainstay there, people remember them. It just doesn't work in the opposite. So I meet somebody, I know I met them at camp, and it's like, oh, I can't remember their name. Yeah. Frustrating. But it was great to meet all those people. I enjoyed it very much.
And you've found your way into doing what I think is work that you can connect in some ways, because, you know, doing that kind of work, not just because of the nature of working at a camp, but the nature of your personality. You've collected thousands of stories and have mentored and have been part of so many people's lives. And now you are finding yourself in a place where you are collecting people's stories and you're collecting histories of places and of people, and you're putting it in books. And I'm wondering if you've felt that connection, if you've thought about that connection in your writing, or if it's just something that you think you do naturally. Or
interesting question. I never thought of it that way. I've always been fascinated by people's stories. You know, remember the campfires at Camp Hollis and the stories that people would tell and things like that. I was always, and I think the thing that got me really interested in wanting to be a writer was being a part of writing the history of Camp Hollis and learning that amazing history, and then figuring out how to put it onto paper. I really enjoyed that. It was sort of a perk of still working for the county and still running the camp, but sort of dabbling in that writing. And I think that's where it kind of took off for me, was, wow, I would love to spend time doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
Now I have the time to do it.
And do you find that through that process of collecting so many other people's stories that you've started reflecting on your own and collecting your own stories?
Absolutely. Well, and I think part of the writing and some of what I'm going to share tonight is poetry. To me, my poetry is almost always some part of my history. You know, maybe a small moment or a significant moment, but it's a history of some kind. And I think if you look at it in a certain way, a lot of writing is like that. But I think it has something to do with their history.
Absolutely. I know that my story writing does, you know, and I think we can connect with that. And, you know, from hearing the poems that you've written and reading stuff that you've written, even though knowing that some of the stories that you've collected in the books that you've written are other people's stories, I can still feel the connection. You know, I feel like I'm connecting with the writer. I feel like I'm connecting with you through that.
Oh, nice. Thank you. That feels like a compliment to me, because, you know, you get to choose when you know, if you don't mind me mentioning him, right now I'm working on a book about the blizzard of 66. I interviewed a lot of people for that, but I'm getting to pick and choose the pieces that become a part of that book. So really the writer has an amazing job and opportunity to weave the story that they want to tell. That's, I think, the most fun part about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Even though it is somebody else's story, I get to tell it the way I want to.
There's a lot of excitement in that, and there's a lot of pride in that. Is there any kind of hesitation, or I don't know if I would call it stress, but just trying to figure out how to weave that and still tell that story.
I call it a responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really a responsibility. I'm working on a second book about a guy named Bob Sykes, who was a meteorologist for SUNY Oswego and an instrumental part of the blizzard of '66. And I'm writing his biography through the gift of his family. They've asked me to do that, which is an awesome opportunity for a writer. But what a responsibility to put that man's life into some perspective. So yeah, I wouldn't call it stress, but it's definitely, it's on my mind all the time. Is this the right way to say this? Do I even want to say this? Where do I say this? Those are all the things that I want out of respect, and the same with everybody that I interviewed for the Blizzard book, whatever. I want their voice to be strong and clear and true, and that's my responsibility to do that.
Sure. That's really exciting to be able to think about that, and I like the word responsibility a lot more. So thank you for being a writer and having a good vocabulary, because I'm pretty limited sometimes.
Actually, can I say something about that?
Yeah.
There's this myth, I think, or this expectation that when someone's a writer, that they know their vocab. And I tell you, my dictionary and thesaurus is never far from me. And part of what I want to do with being a writer is to inspire others to try it, and to not be afraid of it, or not, well, I'm not a writer. You have a voice, you have a story. Gosh, with computers and spell check, you can work. I mean, it's not exclusive, but you can work a lot of that stuff out. It's more important to get your story out. I like to make it clear that, I never studied professionally to be a writer, and it's really, I'm in my infancy really of learning how to be a writer, but it's a great place to be.
Yeah, a real great place to be. And although maybe you're in your infancy of writing, you're a veteran in collecting stories. And so, growing that and doing that, I think is really good for you and good for everybody out in the community too. How many publications do you have now out in public?
Well, I have 3 books of poetry.
Okay.
The first was called Country Boy, and like it sounds, it's about my roots growing up in rural Fulton. And I'm from a muck farming family, and so there's a lot of stories about my uncle's mucks and my grandparents' mucks. And then I have a second book called People, Places, and Things. I'm actually going to read a couple of those poems tonight, which are about the powerful people, places, and things of my life, which was an awesome experience to whittle that down to 60, right? And then my most recent book is called Reach Out in the Darkness, which is about my love of pop music and how pop music really kind of got me through a pretty anxious childhood and youth. And you and Gina have been partners in sharing that with the public. Yeah, it's been great.
It has been great. It's been a lot of fun, and I know that we're looking forward to doing some more of that. I did have a couple of questions, and I know that when you were working on your Camp Hollis book and your muck farming book, you collected a lot of photographs too, and you were able to see a lot of different pictures. And I know some of the ones from Camp Hollis were just brilliant. They're all the black and whites and old and just fantastic. The muck farm book, did you collect pictures of your family? Are those the pictures that are in there, like the picture on the cover? Are those relatives of yours?
No, actually, there's a couple of pictures of my relatives. 2 of the families that I interviewed for the muck farm book are relatives of mine, uncles.
Okay.
But the other 19 or 20 are area farmers. And I asked them when I interviewed them, do you have pictures that I could have? And interesting about that front cover, which I love, and I didn't bring a copy to share with you tonight, but it was a family, the Coloca family, John Coloca, and he was just showing me the pictures, and as soon as I saw it, it was just, I knew it was the front cover. And actually, I may as well put a plug. I'm still looking for my front cover book for the Blizzard of '66, so if anybody listening has a good picture from the Blizzard of '66, I'd love to see it. I have lots of pictures, but I just haven't gotten the one that I want for that cover yet.
What was it about that one that you saw for the cover that really grabbed you?
Yeah, so picture husband and wife with a baby on the wife's knee, the husband holding fresh cabbage, and behind them acres of muck land.
Mm-hmm.
And they're smiling, which was fortunate.
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful, it just captured what I wanted to show in that book, which is the family of muck farmers, really. I don't know how many of us realize how unique muck farming is to Oswego County. Unique in the world, actually, but centered here in Oswego County. One of the greatest compliments I got was one of the muck farmers at the end of the interview said thank you to me. He said, nobody's ever asked me what it was like. That's what I hope to capture with the history books, is giving people a voice that maybe haven't had it yet.
Yeah, that's your gift, and I'm really glad that you're sharing your gift with everybody. So thanks so much, Jim.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll hear from you more in a little bit.
Thanks.
Tonight's episode of On the Porch Radio Hour is brought to you by Cute. Tonight's episode of On the Porch Radio Hour is brought to you by Cute, Committee for the Embodiment of Western Holiday Togetherness. The Christmas Board of Directors speaks out. What Valentine's Day Board of Directors does next blew my mind. The Christmas Board President, Nicholas Kringle, published a letter earlier this week on official Christmas letterhead, stating the board's dislike for what Valentine's Day has become. The Christmas Board believes that the focus of Valentine's Day has become buying unnecessary gifts and the expectation of receiving material things. Kringle is quoted as writing, "It's ridiculous how materialistic Valentine's Day has become. It used to be about sharing love and recognizing, even through our differences, how great it is that we share love with one another, not chocolate and material items." Kringle further went on to say, "It would be wonderful to start seeing the other holidays follow the lead of Christmas. Then we would see a decline in focus on material goods and a focus on each other and love." The Committee for the Embodiment of Western Holidays would like to honor the Valentine's Day Board's response. Board spokesperson Amor Eros replied in a press conference earlier today. Eros simply said, "We are looking into this matter, and we would like to publicly thank the Christmas Board for the pen and pencil sets they sent us in honor of their holiday. Cute would like to highlight this new development as support for our mission, to bring together all of the Western holidays and show a common vision and goal. Let's share love and the love. Life is the holiday we are celebrating, and the holidays throughout the year are just a way to specify a time to acknowledge that love publicly and together. What is love if it isn't together? Let's evolve backwards. Let's simplify and quiet the noise that has become our holiday celebrations, because you're not celebrating when you are stressing about the unfair expectations we have grown into. Join Cute and holiday every day together." Cute, ladies and gentlemen.
So I was really excited when Matthew and Gina and Renee invited me to come on in honor of Valentine's Day to do some love poems. And it got me thinking about the poems that I've already written about the loves of my life. As I mentioned earlier when we were talking, Matthew, most of my poems are historical. And so I've chosen 4 poems. I'm going to read a couple right now. And these first 2 are from my book, People, Places, and Things. So here's a couple people that were really powerful to me in my life. This first one goes way back. It's called Stirring. The heat from a summer's day settles heavy in this barn loft. Bales of hay have held that heat into the evening, giving off a stifling odor. But I don't care. I'm sleeping out with Tommy tonight. The 2 of us growing up, growing away from our families and toward each other. Tommy is lean and rugged and so cocksure of life. Being close to him is like being him. Once at a self-empowerment retreat, everyone was required to adopt a new first name. I did not hesitate for mine. This windowless loft closes in on me, and I fear I may suffocate, but I do not leave. Tommy's brotherhood trumps the loft's heat and draws me nearer until I am close enough to hear and almost feel his steady, certain breathing. Then, though I never show or tell, Tommy becomes my first love. Thank you. This is one from college years, and certainly we all have opportunity to maybe explore love in college. This is called Why I Celebrate You. That harmony we created singing the big ballads, Evergreen, Rocky Mountain High. Oh, how we build to those powerful endings, how they took us someplace, and how we never wanted to come back. That Christmas, we kept the tree up till March. Some nights camping out underneath it, conversations drifting off, our hope blinking blue and red and yellow. That crisp spring morning, you challenged me to a foot race, letting me keep your pace till we reached our street, where you hit your stride, rushing to the finish line, there to greet me with a bear hug. And all the other times, none eventful perhaps, but special in the way you matched my emotion, note for note, hope after hope. And because in all the days before you and after, no other man has ever done that.
Thanks, Jim. So I understand that you are going to be doing some stuff in the near future at the CNY Arts Center. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm going to be teaching a couple writing classes. One is a poetry class, Intro to Poetry, where we're going to explore some famous and local famous poets. I always try in each poetry class to have at least one local poet featured. And then I'm teaching a class that I call Building Your Writing Muscle, which is for people that want to be writers but just aren't sure how to start. Also, at the center, we're doing an open mic night kind of for writers called Writers Cafe, which is a chance where people can come and just share their writing in a friendly, safe place. We're doing that on the last Sunday of each month. So I think it's the 22nd of February this month. We meet at the Arts Center at the Cayuga Community Campus, and that starts at 6:30. Obviously free, refreshments. Just come, bring your writing. We give each person about 10 or 15 minutes to share their writing, and then some light critique, mostly positive feedback, encouragement kind of thing.
That's great. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
You've been listening to On the Porch Radio Hour. We'll be back soon.
Upcoming events in Central New York is brought to us by iHeart Oswego. Identity Tides is a video art installation by SUNY Oswego Communication Studies Associate Professor Jane Winslow and art instructor Barbara Stout, using multiple artistic media to explore the subject of gender identity. Searching is a student-curated collection of photography from Syracuse's Lightwork. Both exhibits will run through February. Visit oswego.edu or call 312-2113 for more information. The British ensemble Voice comes to SUNY Oswego on their second American tour at 7 p.m. on February 18th. Voice brings a program of songs exploring the beauty, heartache, and humor of love. The trio focuses the program, called If Music Be the Food of Love, on the role of women in music as composer, performer, and muse. The show is February 18th at 7 p.m. Call 312-2141 for more information. The Oswego Players present The Odd Couple, running this weekend and next weekend, with performances Friday and Saturday evenings at 8 p.m. and a Sunday matinee at 2 p.m. on February 22nd. Visit www.oswegoplayers.org for more information.
Theatre du Jour presents Love Letters at the CNY Arts Center. Starring local favorites Banna Rubino and Mark Cole, the show kicks off CNY Arts Center's new dessert theater series on Valentine's Day. Tonight at 8 p.m. Tickets are $15 and include dessert. Also coming up at CNY Arts Center is a 6-week poetry class called Finding the Poetry in Your Life, adult painting classes, and paper crafting classes, as well as winter break classes for school-age children, including Glee Club, guitar class, and Irish dance drama. Visit cnyartscenter.com for more information. The Fulton Community Theater presents Shooting Star, a romantic comedy telling the story of two former college sweethearts who meet up 25 years later in an airport terminal. The show closes this weekend at Tavern on the Lock in Fulton. Call 315-592-2661 for more information. The Oswego Music Hall presents Vance Gilbert with opening act Allison and Zoe on February 21st at 7:30 p.m. The evening before, the Oswego Music Hall hosts an open mic on Friday, February 20th at 7 p.m. with special host Gregory Rosplock. The new songwriter series The Hook will be on Friday, February 27th, featuring John McConnell, Jeffrey Pepper Rogers, and Colin Aberdeen. The Arts Association of Oswego is now accepting entries for the 18th annual Lakeside Statewide Juried Art Exhibition. Entry in this exhibition is open to all artists 18 years of age and older living or working in New York State over the last 2 years. Acceptable media include drawing, painting, sculpture, mixed media, printmaking, photography, ceramics, digital media, and all fine craft. The purpose of the exhibition is to offer a diverse cross-section of artwork currently being produced in New York State. Visit oswegoarts.org/exhibition for prospectus and instructions, or call Lori Kester at 315-343-6599 with questions. The Red Room sessions held at the Wooden Apple Farmstead is a time for songwriters, musicians, and anyone else who wants to build their musical skill and knowledge to get together. We share songs we are working on, bounce musical ideas off each other, and we usually have time to just play a little music. This is a supportive environment where all levels of songwriting and musical experience are welcome. It is the final Sunday of each month. The next session will be February 22nd at 6 p.m.
Ever since age 15, when Gregory Rosplock picked up his bass guitar and started playing around with some buddies, he hasn't put a guitar down since. He's moved on to playing a 6-string, but being a bass player, I believe the bass is still in your heart. Gregory, welcome to the porch.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm not going to ask you to tell us your age. I'm just going to ask you how long has it been since you were 15?
That'd be 12 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good work.
I was not doing math in my head that whole time. I was just making it dramatic.
I had to give him 2 of my fingers so we could figure it out. So you started playing bass with some buddies.
Some girl buddies, yeah.
If you're going to do it, that's the way to go.
Yeah. It was an interesting situation.
That's cool. And so you guys did the band thing for a while, and then they moved, right, out to California?
That's 2 different stories.
Wow, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Because the first 2 girls were high school friends. Okay. And then, they were older than me, and then we all kind of parted ways and whatnot. And then it was in between my freshman and my sophomore year of college that through MySpace, so that ages me a bit, through MySpace, these 2 women found me, and I was in their band as a bass player.
That's great.
For a summer.
And,
cool. It's when you have college in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I'm going to be a starving musician and quit college. And then you're like, no, I'm not. So that, I just kind of went to school after that. And they went off to California.
So now you're a well-fed musician.
I suppose so, yeah.
All right. Good. And so when was it then that you decided to pick up a 6-string?
Well, I did when I was in high school.
Okay.
I can't tell you how I came about it. I used to have this addiction of trading in instruments. So I'd get like a bass guitar, and I'd be like, oh, I want an acoustic now. So I go to the music store, and I'll lose money and, trade it in and, get an acoustic. And, oh, no, I really miss playing bass. And so then I'll do it again. And I did that many times. But yeah, it was in high school when I first played acoustic guitar, and just kind of noodled around on it. Tried writing songs initially, and they were terrible, as your first song is usually. But
right.
Just kind of grew from there, and it's easier for me to play music as with an acoustic guitar because I'm a little bit of a control freak. So when you're in a band and you're a bass player, you don't get a lot of say in what happens.
Sure don't.
You're oh, he's still here. So, this allows me to just do things when I want, how I want.
So you tried writing some songs, and you didn't feel like it went real well, and then you moved and lived in a whole bunch of different places.
Yeah.
And then you picked up the pen and paper again.
Yes.
Do you feel like all of that moving and all of the life experience was a new spark for you to draw off of those experiences?
Yeah, definitely. Especially when I wrote a little bit. I lived in Buffalo for 6 years, and things happened, and I had to leave there. And that experience in of itself kind of was it wasn't horrible, but there was a lot going on in my head, and there was a lot that I had to channel. That was when I started writing more. And so, like, one of the songs that the song I'm going to play next is one that I wrote in 2011, and has kind of been the one that I've kind of stuck with. It's probably my favorite song I've ever written, but it came from a time that there was a lot of, I'll just say it, there was a lot of therapy happening both within me and, in my environment. So a lot of my songwriting is kind of it's a therapeutic process.
Absolutely.
Which I guess makes my songs a little bit more sad or sadder sounding, but that's a lot of the times what I use it as. And that's why it's hard for me to write a happy song, because I don't really need it at that time. I don't need songwriting when I'm happy. I'm happy because I'm happy. I'm happy because, I'm engaged, or I'm happy because, things are going well, So I don't need anything to help me get through that, because I have it. I have everything that I need at that time. So that's when I write songs, is when I need to get through something. So
yeah, and I think that's really important, and I'm glad that you're doing that. I have to be honest, I really enjoy listening to your music.
Thank you.
You have a fiance, and
yes, I do.
And you have a dog.
Happy Valentine's Day, fiance, Kristen.
Who I'm assuming didn't feel like getting out in the weather.
Well, it's funny because, you talked about how amazing the weather is right now.
Yeah.
And before I left, she said, "Are you really leaving?"
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
That's right. I've got a show to do.
That's right. I'm on radio, babe. I gotta go.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The tragic life of the artist.
Yeah.
Man.
Sacrifices.
That's right. You'll have a good song to write about this, for sure.
Yeah.
After the drive home, I bet.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully it's not too sad.
Yeah. So you have another song for us.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear it.
Sure.
Gregory Rosplock.
Treading through the pages of a whole story, amongst the lines she was lost in between. There was no device that could save her life. There was no flame that could lend a light. Whoa. Her pain and suffering fell through the floor. She lost the battle but won the war. And with that she could unlock all of her doors. She won't feel this burden anymore. Ooh. Ooh. She had good reason to give up all hope, exhausted and burned out, all up in smoke. Suddenly a new direction in the sky. It's okay to feel confused, it's okay to cry. Whoa. Whoa. Her pain and suffering fell through the floor. She lost the battle, but won the war. And with that she could unlock all of her doors. She won't feel this burden anymore. Ooh. Ooh. There is always a malfunction in the ride, but if you're still breathing, you're still alive. Still alive. Her pain and suffering fell through the floor. She lost the battle, but won the war. And with that she could unlock all of her doors. She won't feel this burden anymore. Whoa, oh, oh. Whoa, oh, oh. Whoa.
Ready?
On the banks of Trilliums, my lover lied in late, and I took out my guitar and a tune for her I played. In the middle of the tune, I stopped and I did say, oh darling, would you leave me? Oh, when you were a girl, did you hear your father say that he'd rather see you dead and buried in the clay sooner than be married to any runaway by the lonely sweet banks of Trillium? Oh darling, I'm no runaway, and soon I'll let them know that I can take the good hard work and never For the music doesn't need me at another shallow show. No day will I go roaming to another. I should leave it all behind, never to return again. For the cities, they're all mine, and I have nothing more to say. For now my true love will sit and we will play by the lovely sweet banks of Trillium. Farther along we'll know more about it. Farther along we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by.
So I wanted to echo what Greg was saying when you were talking about having happy times, but that it was times that maybe weren't quite so happy that you turned to writing songs and music. And I was thinking about the same thing for me with poetry, that, you know, I tend to grab the paper and pen when I'm struggling with something or working something or trying to capture something. So just nice to hear you say that, and I felt like I connected to you on that. Again, when Matthew and Gina and Renee asked me to do poems, love poems, it was just a great opportunity to revisit poems that I've written, that were written quite a while ago, about people that I guess I haven't thought about much in a while. And what a great gift to go back and remember those people. To have the opportunity to fall in love is a rare thing. To review my life and look at the 4 poems that I'm reading tonight, which were each about different people, just to be able to go back and visit that really special time of being in love, how nice that was. And so I'm going to share this next poem. And music is very important to me. Listening to music primarily when I was younger. As I got older, I studied piano, and now I can play a little bit of piano. But so this is a poem that kind of resonates with music. In fact, the name of the poem is Resounding. Because I mark time by the music I have loved, and by the way our love slips in and out of tune, it hit me hard hearing Lennon on the radio today. Remembering a young you dancing to the Beatles, romping through their hits, skin flushed, eyes closed to the world, in your smile so rarely revealed. Years later, John and Yoko croon Starting Over from the kitchen, and it drifts to the bed where I lie, still warm from our first night together. I hear your voice atop theirs as you scramble our breakfast, cracking open a new era. And today it was John's lullaby, Love, a tender piano cradling its simple lyric. Remember how I burned that song to your birthday CD, which I hope you took with you for keeping memories aflame. Does he move you like he moves me here at my flickering core, where the only thing that makes sense these days is that we tried? So the last poem I'm going to read is from this new book about music in my life, Reach Out in the Darkness. Just a little background about this poem. Several of the poems feature songs that were important to me, as this one does. And this is a song that most people know, You've Got a Friend. And You've Got a Friend had an interesting history, written by Carole King featured on her album Tapestry, which for those in my age group was a major album in our lives. And then James Taylor covered it and made it actually the hit. So I'm going to refer to the song quite a bit in this poem. It's called You've Got a Friend. We were tragically young, falling into each other's lives from some all-powerful force, teenage misfits, confused by what our hearts longed for, finding clumsy ways to get by. Like the day we sat together, tapestry filling our musty high school gym, weaving tissue paper flowers into a junior prom palace. Fitting in was all that mattered until this song began. The words instantly ours, like stumbling onto a foreign land already fluent in its language. You and I sang it softly to each other, to ourselves. The years rolled by, love more, not less mysterious. Anxious attempts at girl and boyfriends, troubles away at college, our own mismatched marriage, but always this song to lean on. Just yesterday you called to say you saw James and Carol in concert and thought of me 3,000 miles and all that pain away. This song with us on that phone line, it's truth sent by a love we've come to know.
I wish you many sunsets, colors to inspire your love, journeys through snowy mountains and flying on the wings of doves. Everything I love about you is everything you are, and you'll find the love I'm giving tucked inside your wish you late night dancing underneath the starry sky, a blanket full of bigger dreams and a pillow to rest your weary eyes. Everything I love about you is everything you are, and you'll find the love I'm giving tucked inside your wish you poetry to say exactly what you mean. Fireflies keep you strong and a river full of endless song. Everything I love about you is everything you are, and you'll find the love I'm giving tucked inside your everything I love about you is everything you are. You'll find the love I'm giving tucked inside your heart.
Thank you.
On the Porch Radio Hour, music director Gina Holsapple. Check her out at ginaholsapple.com and pay attention to the song a month that she's putting out for the new album. Thanksgiving Day 2000. Michael Josephs remembered. He was sitting at his table, just finished up eating dinner with his family. Everybody else was milling around, cleaning up. And he had this really strong memory. He remembered being a kid and hanging out in the kitchen at his grandparents' house, where everybody gathered around the big table, and then, of course, all the younger kids sat around a smaller table. And he remembered the first time he really participated in Thanksgiving at his grandparents' house and sitting at the table with all the other kids and passing around all the food and having people come over and cut up their food and really getting into it. He remembered the evolution to where the first time he was invited to sit at the adult table, the big table, and talk about his freshman year of college so far and how things were going and the things he was doing and the people he was meeting and being a really big personality. And he remembered all the times since then and how things had changed and how he could have been in the position that he was in. And so the next day, being a really busy day for a lot of people, it was a day he never really left the house because Black Friday wasn't his thing. But he got in his car and he drove around town, and there was a little sandwich board sitting outside of a coffee shop, and it said, "Open mic here tonight." So he pulled in the parking lot, and it was 4 hours before the open mic was supposed to start. But he sat in the car and he wrote, and then he just sat and waited. And he started watching people file in, and he went in and sat down at a table. And he thought he was going to get up, and he thought he was going to read, thought he was going to tell a story, but he just watched, and he listened. And there were people that wrote poems and stories that had some really deep stuff to say, stuff that really resonated with his soul. And it was there all on paper. All of those moments from the first time he remembered sitting at the kids' table up until that time when he was in college, up until now. And he realized that he was really warm and his heart was beating really fast and he was really into it. And he looked down at his paper trying to figure out if he was going to sign up to read or not when he saw a drop of water hit his paper. But it wasn't sweat. It was a tear. And his heartbeat went so fast that it felt like one steady hum. There was no distinction between the heartbeats or his breaths. And in a moment, he realized he had stood up and he had pounded his fist on the table. And he yelled, "I'm a good man!" And the place went silent. And there wasn't anybody reading yet, but there was a young woman getting ready to read. And she turned really red. And she said, "You probably are." And he got really mad at that point because probably wasn't enough. He was. He walked out of that coffee shop, got in his car, and he drove home. As soon as he walked through the door, he didn't even take his coat off. He walked right over to the computer, and he got online, and he booked a plane ticket to Arkansas. He was going to the Ozarks, and he was going to meet some friends, and he was going to hang out, and he was going to tell them his story. He was going to tell them the stories that they'd never heard. They'd been friends for 15 years, and he'd never told them these stories. And he needed to say it, and he wanted them to hear it. And so he showed up, and he spent the next week just pouring his heart out, and they spent their week listening. And it was the greatest week he'd had in a long time. And he felt so much lighter and so much better. And he wasn't sure he wanted to go back home. He wasn't sure he was ready for that, but he knew he needed to. And he knew he was strong, and he remembered. He remembered all of those times, and he knew that he was a good man. And as they were saying goodbye, he realized that he needed to come back. And they said their final goodbyes. And he got on the airplane. And because he had booked his flight so late, there was only one seat left on the way home. It was in the very back of the plane. It was the last seat on the plane. The seat that says, "For flight attendant only." But they gave it to him. And there he was, sitting in the flight attendant only seats. Set his phone next to him, and he put his head down. And everything went really quiet. And he was starting to relax and feeling at peace. When, in the back of his mind, he was hearing something, and he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. What memory is this? And why is it getting louder? And there it was. "I'm in the middle of a divorce," it said. "I'm in the middle of a divorce. I don't want to sit back there. I'm in the middle of a divorce." And he thought, I'm not in the middle of a divorce. At least I don't want to be. I don't think I am. Is that what's happening? And I really don't mind sitting back here. It's not that bad. And there it was again, that voice. "But I'm in the middle of a divorce. Excuse me, I'm in the middle of a divorce." And he looked up. There's this woman, and she's got 2 very large purple bags slung over her shoulder, and her eyes were huge, and her forehead was all wrinkled up from how high her eyebrows had reached from opening her eyes that wide. And that's all she was saying. I'm in the middle of a divorce. And she got the flight attendant and she's talking to her. And the flight attendant is very, very calmly, very professionally getting her to calm down. And the woman finally came back and she looked at the number above Michael Joseph's head, and then looked at her ticket, and then looked at the number, and then reached right in front of him and said, "That's my seat right there." And the flight attendant said, "Yes, ma'am, it is." So Michael stood up, and it's the back of the plane, and it's tight. And so there they are, all three of them trying to jockey around, trying to fit into the seat, trying to fit out of the seat, trying to fit in the aisle, trying to fit in the seats next to them. People aren't moving, and it's just the three of them all dancing. And so the flight attendant had to snuggle in real close while Michael's back was up against the bathroom door. And she was just a few inches shorter than him, so her mouth was right next to his neck, and it was awfully awkward. But they had to let the woman in the middle of her divorce into her seat. And the whole time she's talking, and he's not listening. And he just turned to her and said, "Yeah, you can have the seat next to the window. It'll be real nice." And he smiled. A real big smile, real warm and welcoming. And the flight attendant looked up and said, "You're a good man." And he thought, yeah, I am. So he sat back down, and he looked, and the woman was visibly tired. And she smelled very strongly of alcohol, and her eyes were still really forced wide open, but bright bloodshot. And she said, "I'm in the middle of a divorce." And he said, "I heard." And then she looked down, as if she was just finally realizing that she'd been saying that at the top of her lungs through the whole plane, from the front all the way to the last seats. But then she looked up at him again and said, "Those are nice shoes. I like your shoes. These are my shoes. I just bought them recently. I was planning on running in a marathon. But you see, my husband, or my soon-to-be ex-husband, he booked all these flights for me. Booked all these flights so that I could fly and see my family for Thanksgiving. And I know he did that on purpose. He put me in the last seat of every plane, and I just want to be somewhere else." And the flight attendant was standing there, and she looked down, and she had her sheet of paper, and she was scrolling through her sheet of paper, and she said, "I'm going to see what I can do." And so she walked up and down the aisles, while this woman explained to Michael all about shoes and why they're so important and how you have to have the right shoes, because if you don't stand correctly, your spine isn't in alignment, and you get out of place, and you have to see the chiropractor, and your feet start to form differently, and your feet hurt, and you get shin splints, and it's bad for your knees, and your hips are out, and your back is out. And she was going to run a marathon, and man, those are good shoes for you. Until finally the flight attendant came back, and she said, "I'm sorry, miss. I don't have any more seats for you." And then she turned to Michael Josephs and said, "Sir, would you mind sitting over here, please?" And across the aisle was another seat, another 2 seats. They were both empty. And she put him over there. And as he stood up, she gave him a real big smile and said, "You're a good man." And he said, "Yeah, I know. Thanks." And so he didn't have to sit right next to the woman with the shoes who's in the middle of a divorce, who was certain that she'd been booked in the last seat of every plane out of spite or out of meanness. And he remembered all of those times, and they looked differently now as he was on his flight home. They exited out onto the runway, and he made it out into the parking lot in good time and got his bags. All the while, the woman with the large purple bags that was in the middle of a divorce just bustled along, and he could see her the whole time. And she just kind of ran out into the parking lot looking for her ride, and she had no idea where they were, and she just looking wildly around. And a couple of Michael's friends had shown up to pick him up, and they said, "Wow, that woman just ran right out in front of those cars." And he smiled and said, "Yeah, she's in the middle of a divorce, but she likes my shoes." And they drove home, not in silence completely, but close, and it felt good. It felt at peace. And they pulled in the driveway, and he stopped. And he turned around, and he remembered. "This is my home. This is my only home. This is the only sacred ground that I have ever known. Should I stray in the dark night alone, rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eden. Rock me, goddess, in the gentle arms of Eden." This has been On the Porch Radio Hour. I want to thank our audience, Joe. And I want to thank everybody on Concert Window for tuning in. And I want to thank everybody for listening to the podcast. I want to thank Jim Farfaglia, a local writer. I want to thank Gregory Rosplock, a local musician, for being here and being part of our awesome radio show this evening. Braving the weather, braving the show. It's been a real fun time. Thanks for being here so much.
On the Porch is a production of the Wooden Apple Farmstead with host Matthew Wood. Our musical director is Gina Holsapple. Our stage manager is Ray Monet. Our sound technician is Gina Holsapple. Contributing writers for this show include Matthew Wood and Jim Farfaglia. Special guests include Gregory Rosplock and Jim Farfaglia. Find information about past shows, being on the porch, and much more online at ontheporch.weebly.com.